Welcome, my name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, the animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. Today, Josh Zapata Palmer and I are exploring the world of Hyrule in Nintendo's 2017 publication, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Released as part of the Nintendo Switch's launch and coming in as the 19th mainline Zelda title, Breath of the Wild has been heralded as one of the greatest video games of all time, and we are about to explore why. Now, with hundreds of hours of gameplay to explore, we have a lot to dive into. So spoiler warning for anyone who has yet to play The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. And let's get started and let's get animated.
There are many categories to go through. I'll just say for our listeners out there that Kelly told me that she has 6 pages of notes for this episode, which I find so great and telling of who Kelly is as a person. That she just loves to research. She's such a dramaturg, and I just love that.
It's true. I just kept thinking of things and kept remembering things because there's so much in this game that you experience, and just like once you open that memory box of things that you did, it's like, oh, but then there was this and that and the other thing, and it's so phenomenal.
Things just keep coming back. They keep coming out. We've talked about this a number of times over the past year. As we've been playing this game separately, we'd come together as friends and be like, oh, like, did you do this? Did you do that? And then we'd have to stop and say, no, we can't talk about this until we're recording it on the podcast.
Exactly. And that's one of the magical qualities of this game, is that everyone's playthrough is different, and every time you play it will be different, and everyone has their own story about Breath of the Wild, which is just beautiful.
Yeah, I think what's cool about it is it's one of those games that even if you are not into Zelda, if you're not into gaming even, it's something that you can really enjoy, if not just by watching someone else play or by watching it on YouTube, because there's so much beauty that is there. My wife, for example, she does not really play video games too much, except some Mario games with me. But she never really played any Zelda games, so she wasn't really into it. But when I got the game, I was so freaking excited because I had played all these Zelda games, throughout my whole life. And when we finally were able to play it, she was watching me play, and she would just say things like, oh my gosh, look at that mountain. That is so beautiful. I want to go there. And I was, so then I would be like, okay, let's go there. And we would just like walk over to it and look at the views off the mountain. That's just so cool. That doesn't happen in a lot of games.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they make this world of Hyrule such that you want to explore every nook and cranny, even though it's not like every nook and cranny is filled with things. There's a lot of open space in this game, but that's what, that's part of that aesthetic and the adventure, and you're running across this beautiful, serene mountain valley, and then, you'll occasionally run into a bokoblin or something, and it's interrupted,
Right, and it's so immersive in that way, and that's one of the things I loved about it is that like you can just be playing the game and running around, and it feels like you're really there and doing it because you have to take the time to go places sometimes, especially before you've found all of the towers and the shrines, and you can't just like teleport your way around the world.
Right.
But when you're just like running all over the place, it just immerses you into this world, and there aren't as many like gamey quote elements at first. You're really just kind of living this life, except for sleeping and using the bathroom. He doesn't do that.
Right. But it is a game of survival. He's got to survive the attacks of these creatures, and you've got to cook food to, replenish your hearts and all of these things. So it's really great and really crazy, and I just can't wait to dive into everything about it.
Okay. So let's have a little bit of structure then, and as we dive into this for our listeners out there. Kelly, why don't you start with just giving us a little breakdown for those people who don't really know Zelda. If there's anyone out there who doesn't know Zelda, I'm sorry, but Kelly, why don't you give them a basic introduction and start with what is this game and where did it come from and all that jazz.
Absolutely. So, the Legend of Zelda series, in general, is always about, obviously, the Princess Zelda. But you play as Link, who's the hero of Hyrule. Hyrule is the kingdom in which they all live. And there's a Triforce, and there's the Triforce of wisdom, of power, and of courage. Link holds the power of courage. Zelda has the Triforce of wisdom, and Ganon has the power Triforce. So they all together make the Triforce and are doomed to repeat their constant fight for balance. So every game you are Link, you either become the hero of Hyrule in some way or fashion, or in this one you already are, and you go to defeat Ganon to save the princess, and all is well with Hyrule until it all happens over again.
Such is the circle of life in Hyrule. It's so great. It just makes me just hearing the words Hyrule and Triforce makes me think of the song with the da 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 da. So it just gets me right back there immediately just by hearing those words.
It's so good. Oh man. And every entry in this series has a completely new aesthetic and environment and feel, and this game is no different. Breath of the Wild came out in 2017 with the release of the new Nintendo console, the Nintendo Switch. They also released it for the Wii U because originally Breath of the Wild was going to be for the Wii U, but then the Wii U sucked, so we all moved on.
Yeah, that's right. Rightfully so.
And personally, when it came out, just everyone was obsessed. I kept seeing all these beautiful things. I waited until the beginning of last year, so the beginning of 2019 is how long I waited to play this game. And I honestly don't know how I lasted that long.
I'm glad you say that because I did too. We're the same. We waited a really long time. Well, in the scheme of things, and because
right.
It just needed to take its time, and I don't think I was ready. I think I needed to be in the place where it had come out, and I hadn't played a Zelda game since Twilight Princess. I kind of skipped some of the other ones, and
you skipped Skyward Sword?
I did. I didn't play Skyward Sword. I didn't play that other one where you're the four. You can play four characters, four links. But yeah, I skipped those ones, and so when it came out, I was ripe for it, but I didn't own the Switch, and I didn't have the money for it, and so I was like, I'll just have to play it when I play it with friends or something. Someone else who owns it, I'll play it sometimes, and that's exactly what happened. The very first time I played it was I went to a friend's house who had it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to play, and he's like, okay, it's on master mode, so good luck. And then I died 1,000 times.
I mean, you're gonna die in this game a lot no matter what, but if you start on master mode, good luck.
I know. That was my introduction to it. Master mode, for those of you who don't know, is the version of the game after you beat it once, you can play it again. And it's way more difficult.
Yeah.
So you just die a lot and you get killed really quickly. But then I think I got it because I ended up getting a Switch for Christmas in the end of 2019. 2018, and so the beginning of 2019, just like you, Kelly, I started playing
Yes.
it then and played it throughout all
Yes.
of last year.
Our Breath of the Wild stories correlate. So I was in another state at the end of 2018, like both mentally and physically. And at the previous job I had, I got this nice big holiday bonus, and I was so like #done with everything. I went straight to the nearest GameStop. I purchased a Nintendo Switch, and I purchased Breath of the Wild. That was it. I don't need the Switch for anything else. I'm just here to play this game.
I mean, yeah, that's really what it's for.
And honestly, it is totally, if that was the only game I ever played on the Switch, it would be worth it. Like, it's worth the price of the console.
I'd totally be satisfied too. I've had hours and hours and hours worth of gameplay on that game alone. Of course, I have bought other games. I've ended up buying all sorts of other ones that I've enjoyed playing, but it really is worth the purchase.
How many hours was your first playthrough? I think mine was like 140.
You know, I don't know, and I'm gonna check because I actually have my Switch with me right now.
Okay.
So, I'm just gonna look.
It's just crazy how many hours you can spend in this game just with one playthrough, not to mention like any others. I just started a second playthrough where I'm trying to beat the game, beat as in capture all the divine beasts and defeat Ganon with only 3 hearts.
Oof. Wow. Okay.
So
that's a challenge right there.
I've made it through one divine beast. Moving on to another.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's possible. People have done it, but
people have done a lot of crazy things.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, just Google Breath of the Wild gameplay records or something like that, and people do ridiculous things. I mean, I remember watching a video of a guy who, as soon as the first time he ever played the game, he got off the tutorial island of that plateau, and then he went straight to defeat Ganon. Like, didn't do anything else. Oh my gosh. And that was really funny because he did terribly. Like, it was impossible.
Oh, yeah. If you've never played the game before, like, you're gonna get zapped immediately.
Yeah, it's pretty rough because, I mean, your weapons break and your armor's not strong enough. You don't have the hearts. You don't have the stamina. Like, it's just crazy.
So, in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, what makes this game different than other Zelda games is, well, number one, big thing, it's an open world concept where you can go anywhere at any time. Well, after you defeat the tutorial section, then you can go and do whatever you want. Just like Josh was saying, you could go straight to Ganon if you want to, and you're gonna die probably, but you can if you want.
You can do it anyway.
And one of the big things that the developers had honestly been trying to do since like Wind Waker is that there's no loading screens. If you want to walk from one end of Hyrule to the other, you can do that without a single loading screen. It's crazy. And it's very unique for a Zelda game. Zelda games are usually very linear and you're following a specific adventure path for Link and for the story. That this is just absolutely crazy. They change a ton of stuff from the normal Zelda formula, but that's like the big one, the big like hook for this game in particular. So you start the game and Link wakes up in the Shrine of Resurrection to the voice of Zelda saying, "Wake up, you have to go." And you get a little Sheikah tablet and you meet an old man who basically gets you through the tutorial section on the Great Plateau, in which you get your little powers. And these kind of feel like the items you normally would like find in the dungeons of a Zelda game that you would then carry through your journey. Except you get them all at once right at the beginning. So you can like stop kind of stop time with stasis on an object, which means you can hit it a whole bunch and then the force will build up and then like skyrocket the item. Or you can use the ice power and like make ice where there's water. And you can obviously you have bombs. That's like a Zelda staple to have bombs. And
these ones can roll, or they can be cubes and just stay
yes,
put, which is nice.
You have bomb options. And then you can use magnesis and anything metal you can move around, which is super cool. So all of these tools are at your disposal, and they help you in not only the shrines and the divine beasts, but also just in the world itself. And ultimately, like, Link goes through this story, and you like remember things from the past because he was put in the Shrine of Resurrection 100 years ago when Calamity Ganon came and like destroyed Hyrule. So it's like this really eerie, like apocalyptic, you know, Zelda feel. It's very strange. So that's kind of it, because to be honest, there isn't much of a story.
That's true. That's true. There's not much, because pretty much as soon as you find out, you know, after you get all those different abilities like Kelly was talking about, you find out from the king 100 years ago that you're the hero and you need to go defeat Ganon, and this is what you need to do. And then you get your little quest marker, you jump off the plateau, and then there you go. And like, you know the story, and there are little details that kind of come up here and there. And through exploring those lost memories, basically the way that works is you have to like walk to a specific point based on a picture that you are shown. And if you can find this one specific spot to stand, then you can remember something that Link has long forgotten. And then you get a little bit of more insight into the story. And most of those are really about Zelda and not as much about Link and Zelda's past and his relationship to her, and well, their relationship to each other, and her relationship to her dad, and the doubt that she experiences. And I think those elements of the story are really interesting, but they definitely aren't as connected and vital as in previous Zelda games.
Yeah.
So it's not as driven by that as in most others.
Absolutely. And I was reading in the art book that the developers wanted those memories to really highlight Zelda and make you, like, as the player, want to save her, which is cool. And I think they do a good job of showcasing Zelda's personality. And she is a much different Zelda than we've seen previously. She's got her own personality. She's wanting to research the relics. She's not in tune with her power, her Triforce power. And like, it's really cool to also see a relationship between her and the king, because that doesn't happen very often either. But yeah, I would say this is like, okay, from the get-go, this is like my favorite Zelda game ever. So anything I say like that's like, oh, I wish something was different or whatever, just know that it's still my favorite regardless of its faults.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. But for sure, the story is something that's lacking because it's so open world and so like, the story is how you play it. So everyone has a different story. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I feel like I would hope that in future games, if they could just block off certain sections. I know that's not as cool, but like, I love Zelda stories, and it's too bad you never played Skyward Sword, because I know a lot of people don't like that game, but I loved it because I loved the story. I'm like a sappy, like, romantic, and I loved it.
Yeah, well, that's fine. You're entitled to doing that. I heard about it and was like, just wasn't that interested by it. And I really loved doing Wind Waker. I love open world games. I loved doing Twilight Princess as well. That was my favorite Zelda game prior to this one. Other than, like, because I think I'd played all the other ones minus the two of Skyward Sword and that other four, the other one I can't remember the name of. But yeah, the story here in Breath of the Wild, you know, it'd be interesting to see what they do in the future with expanding it if they are deciding to do the second one. I'm sure they'll do another one. If they add in more story elements like you suggested. I don't know if they will though, because it just doesn't seem like that is their focus. Like it seemed like they really wanted game designers to be able to let go of their control on your experience and let the gamers themselves take control of what their own experience was, because it's so individualistic. It's very much like, this is my story, my journey, and if you kind of force everybody to go down a specific tunnel at a specific point in time, you prevent that from happening. And so I don't know. I totally hear what you're saying, because I agree the plot is a little bit thin and there's not a ton that is that you can really latch on to. But I don't know. I guess it could go either way, and I'd probably still be happy.
It's true. Regardless of what happens next, like, I'm gonna love it. It's not a problem. And when I was playing this game, I did not care about the plot.
Oh, of course.
Like, I was just like in my own story, in my own world, and that excitement and the thrill of exploration was like, that is what this game was supposed to do. And so this is just me like reminiscing on the fact that, like, oh, but I like a linear Zelda story, And I think everyone has some of that growing pain right now, because this game is so different from every other Zelda game. And this is the new Ocarina of Time. Like, this is the new, like, breakthrough into a new Zelda universe. Like, we're into a new era, I guess, of Zelda with this game. And I'm just I'm very excited and very happy, but a little bit sad.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the nature of time and innovation, of course, and that's just what happens, and we do at some point need to accept those things, but it doesn't mean we have to look back in the past with sorrow. And here's what I think. You're right. It totally opens the door to a whole bunch of new things, which is just so fun. And that, like, who knows what could happen next. Okay, so listeners, here's a little bit about me. I don't have a great memory. It's just a fact. Any of my friends and family will know that, like, I am so absent-minded. I'll forget things because I'm so focused on one thing that it doesn't register, and it just goes out the door. And so sometimes things will come up where people will say to me, like, Josh, do you remember when we did this thing a while ago, like a couple years ago? It was like such a fun time. Like, do you remember this? And I'd be like, no, I don't. and then they'd be like, oh, come on, like, what about this, like, the fact that we were, adventuring in the woods here, do you remember doing that? And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, yes, actually I do remember a little bit of that. And it would start to come back to me, and then I get to explore, and it feels like rediscovering memories all over again. Because of that fact, that's just the way that my life kind of goes on a day-to-day basis. When I played this game, I felt like I literally was Link, rediscovering my past and being like, oh my gosh, this is my life. Like, I'm doing this all the time. So I'm like, every time I play, I'm just running around the field being like, oh, I don't think I've ever been here before. And then I open up my map and I'm like, no, I've definitely been here before. and it's just like constant rediscovery, which is, I think, why I like the game so much, because I would go to these new places and find it again, and then I'd find these memories like we talked about earlier where I'd learn about Zelda, and I just loved that because it felt like how I felt when I would remember things with my friends, and how rich that experience was to just take me from a place of, like, just kind of being a little baby child who couldn't remember things, and then, like, now I have this rich history all of a sudden. Like, it's just so cool. And to be Link and to be him exploring the world, using those rediscovered memories to expand his skill set and get stronger and faster and have more stamina, and like it just felt so empowering that on days when I would have bad days and I, like, was just, making lots of mistakes or not remembering things in my, my life, and, accidentally dropping stuff and, being clumsy Josh. If I felt really anxious or bad about myself, sometimes I'd end up playing this game and I'd feel so empowered afterwards. I'd be like, you know what? Link can forget things and he's still awesome.
That's true. He literally forgets everything.
He forgets everything all the time. And he lives his entire life, and then they invent a new game and he does his whole life again and he's totally satisfied doing it. And, it's just beautiful. And so my personal journey with playing the game felt very affected by that. I really identified with him in that way. And so I was able to kind of empower myself by playing the game and to live a better life outside of the game. That being said, my personal gameplay style, that doesn't mean I was just kind of running around aimlessly re-exploring the same things over and over. I'm not a goldfish or anything. I did a lot of questing, and I get really focused on one thing at a time, and I really wanted to expand the world. And so as soon as I got off the plateau, I was like, I followed a little bit of that the main quest trail to find what's her name?
Impa.
Impa, and then I followed that and getting to the next village and then just kind of expanding. And I remember specifically getting to the point where there's no longer a main quest line to follow. Like, you go to Impa and then she tells you to go to this other village, and then the next thing is basically you have 4 of these divine beasts to find before you fight Ganon.
Yeah.
And that's it. and you don't know where are they? How are you going to get there? And so you just had to go. You just had to pick one, put it on your map, and you kind of had a vague idea, and you just made your way over it. And you climbed a mountain if you had to, and if it started raining, you fell off the mountain. And, and it was just such a beautiful time, because it just felt so much like a true adventure of rediscovery. And he goes on this big hero's journey. I think this game, one of the strongest features of it is how well it follows an individualized version of the hero's journey. Because I think, Kelly, you introduced me to this guy, Creative Pep Talk. There's a podcast by Andy J. Pizza, who's this wonderful illustrator, and he did this podcast on how Link and the hero's journey are correlated. So if you're more interested in that, go listen to him. He'll tell you a lot better than me. But I just loved that fact, because it felt like, all these side quests that you go on really make him stronger and allow you to get better weapons and better abilities, and you as a player get better at the things that you do, whether that's I'm really good at fighting bokoblins, and so I'll go and find them out. Or if you're like, I really hate fighting, I die all the time, I'm just gonna sneak by and put on my sneaky costume and stealth my way around. Or you're gonna fly away, there's just so many choices, and I just find that to be such a beautiful expression of individualism. And that's why I think this game has changed the scope and the landscape of gameplay, because in the future, gamers are going to expect that their personal experiences can be tied into the game itself.
Right.
Otherwise, it won't be as deeply invigorating. It'll just be more of a I guess just a game. It raises the question of, like, is this game breaching art? Some people would argue that video games and games can't really be art, but this particular game, Breath of the Wild, I think there are plenty of games out there that can qualify, but this one really makes that debate of are games art a difficult thing to answer, because to me it really is, because of that fact that it just connects to so many people on so many different levels.
Absolutely. It really is like this blank, beautiful canvas in which you can just experience something, and everyone's experience is different.
So what's your style like? What's your personal story with the game, Kelly?
When I got this game, I only ever saw virtual sunlight. Because if I was not at work, I was on the bus playing the game. I was at home playing the game. I was off in a corner during lunch playing the game. Like, I had a Switch now. I could take it with me wherever I went.
Oh, what a wonderful thing. Thank you, Nintendo.
Oh, thank you. And so I played this game nonstop for like a month. And like, just to start out, I was on the Great Plateau for too long. Like,
why?
The Great Plateau is basically a mini version of the entire rest of the game, except you're stuck there so that you can learn how things work. But it has everything that's normally in the game in the world. I was elated and so excited, running around, gathering things, cooking things, fighting things. I didn't want to leave the Great Plateau.
Oh my gosh.
I was having a grand old time. So it's just like that's how my first gameplay experience was defined, was honestly because I learned so much on the Great Plateau. And trust me, I died a lot still. Like, when you get off the Great Plateau, there's no screwing around. It is like giant monsters are coming to kill you now.
All over the place, yes. And there's just so much fear all over, because you only have 3 hearts, and if you get hit twice, you're basically dead.
And I am like archer extraordinaire. That's my go-to combat.
Oh, I was going to say, using the Switch, you know how, because it's got some motion sensing capabilities, when you aim with the bow and you're playing it, you know, you can kind of feel like you're aiming it because you can tilt the controller in such a way. Do you aim like that, or do you aim with a little thumb pad?
Oh, I definitely aim with the, like, motion controls, for sure.
Sweet.
It's so much fun.
You must be really good at it then. Did you do that because you didn't want to get too close, or why'd you use the bow?
I think because, like, I get to a point where I want to try and do as much damage as I can without, like, getting too close, because I don't want to die. And, like, my whole gameplay experience has also just been, like, I think this is true for everyone, but I was just climbing everything. Like, I always, if I saw an enemy in the distance, I'd be like, where's the high ground? I would find the high ground. I would climb. I would get a good vantage point, and I'd just be like, sniper, spew, spew, spew. With my bow and
I can picture
arrow.
it so well. Those little towers that are all over the place, just climbing up. There was one time I was on a mountain somewhere. I think I was in the wintry area, and I was trying to get to a shrine. And as I was climbing the mountain, and I didn't really see very many enemies, but I turned the corner, and there's some moblins, some bokoblins, and one of them was one of those white ones, the white moblins that are like super hard to kill. They're like some of the more difficult enemies. And I made the first mistake of going in there because I didn't know there was a white one. I saved the game, went in there, and then died like right away. So my second round, I climbed up one of those pillar things that are kind of randomly all over the place. And I jumped off that and flew to the nearby mountain, climbed up that, and then just shot bombs at them from above.
Yes.
It just felt so cool. They didn't even know I was there.
Nope. And one of my favorite things to do would be those, like, where all the bokoblins would hang out, like, with those giant skulls that are around sometimes. They'd be hiding in. I'll sneak all the way around the camp, you know, and climb up on the top of the skull, and I'd just be dropping bombs down the little eye hole and, like, explode.
It's so rewarding.
It's so good. And don't get me started for when I got my first bomb arrows, because then I was in business.
Seriously, oh my gosh, yes, those were amazing.
Oh my goodness.
I loved those. Did you ever shoot like those, speaking of those skull things, where sometimes there was like a little rope that would hang down inside the skull that had a lantern on it that if you
Yes.
aimed just right, you could shoot it, and then it would
Yes.
fall down and explode, and the entire skull and all of the people inside, all those bokoblins, just boom.
Oh, love it. It's this game just offers you so many paths to take with like killing enemies or getting around obstacles or anything. It's like they do that. They'll leave some like bombs nearby, or they'll leave some metal boxes around, and so players can really decide for themselves how they want to fight enemies and what their combat style is like, which is just really cool.
The metal boxes, you can use your magnesis power to grab them and swing them around, and I kept getting notes. Sometimes the game gives you little tips on like how you can play better. I kept getting those on like, if you see a metal box, then you can use it to defeat your enemies so you don't use any of your arrows. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Maybe I'll try that. And every time I would do it, I just failed miserably, and I ended up landing the box on top of myself. I just was so bad at it. But I can imagine how people could be pretty good at it.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how other people can do that well. So let's go into the combat a little bit since we're there. This game is, again, very different than other Zelda games in combat specifically. It's usually in Zelda games, you just lock on to an enemy, and you just push the attack button over and over again. Like there's really, it's more of like waiting for the right time to strike rather than like, actually using combat skills. But this game has like a ton of different things you can do. You can like parry, you can like if you jump out of the way in the right way, you can like get a flurry attack in and all this other stuff.
And then you feel like the coolest person ever because you're jumping through the air in slow motion.
Yes. And when you're like in the air and you can slow motion fire arrows, again, that's I just like had a blast. The other thing that's really, really different is that there are tons of different weapons in this game. And unlike any other Zelda game, your weapons break.
Which has its pros and cons, that's for sure.
Yes. So I definitely have my opinions about it, but what are yours?
Okay, sure. I really enjoyed it at first because I thought it was really cool that you could, use a stick and that was your sword, and it only did like 2 damage, and then you could find like a rusty old sword that had been sitting around for 100 years and it did like 4 damage, and you did a little bit better. And so I kind of liked that it made it more difficult to go up the ladder, and that was really fun. But I do think that at some point it reaches this threshold where you're like, okay, like all of my weapons keep breaking. I really like this spear that I just got. I don't even want to use it because if I do, it's gonna break. And so it would get kind of taxing to try and constantly find new weapons. And it does work for some time, especially as you're just getting started, and for a long time I think it's pretty good. But once you reach that threshold of like, I just really want to keep these weapons now, and I like these are good ones, so why do they keep breaking? Because if they break, then I'm gonna have to try and find another one, and they're not that easy to find. Like that I remember getting kind of frustrated with later in the game, but I did think it was pretty cool. It was an interesting way of doing basically like a leveling up system without actually leveling up. You just kind of improve the things that you find. One of the things that I wish that they had was the ability to repair weapons that were breaking.
Yes.
Like maybe you had to go to a blacksmith somewhere and you could just pay a fee. Some of the rupees that you find, you just pay that to fix it up and make it better again. Or like ways that you could improve the weapons, something like that. They've had that in other sorts of games. Zelda, of course, has never had this kind of stuff, so it's really new. And I think they probably try to keep the game fairly accessible, so that people who have not played other games can enjoy it for what it is. versus people like me who have played lots and lots of games. I know that other games have these extensive upgrade systems that you can use for all your weapons, and that might be a little bit too much. But so I think that there were pros and cons. I did wish that there were ways that you could either fix them or maybe like store them. There's like a chest or somewhere that you could put them, so you could just kind of have extras if you lost the weapons you needed. Like, for example, particularly there's all these Korok leaves around where you use them to like blow wind, and they're sometimes useful because you need to be traveling on the sea and you're like blowing wind on your sail. I didn't carry those around with me all the time. It does 1 damage. I didn't want to carry it everywhere.
Yeah.
But, I kind of wanted to be able to pick one up and like find it or like go get it if I needed it and then come back to do what I was going to do or something. Versus like, I guess I'm just going to chop down 15 trees until I find a Korok leaf.
Right.
So that's my opinion on it. What about you?
Yeah, you bring up a really, really interesting point about the blacksmith idea, and I'm just gonna like put a pin in that. Let's pin that up on the wall, and let's get back to that because I have things to say about that too. And I would say my experience was completely different. I used my weapons. I always used my weapons, and I would get frustrated that I'd find so many weapons and I didn't have room for them. Like, I max out my inventory, and you use the Korok seeds to expand your weapons inventory, and I'd be filling up my inventory, but every single time I'd be like, I have to throw something out because I don't have room. So it was more like a fight to use them all on time, like to get them all used up. And I like that because your weapons break, you're forced to keep thinking and keep trying new things. And like, I favored like one-handed swords, but sometimes I was forced to use a spear or like a really heavy dual-handed sword or an axe or something that I wasn't usually using, and then I'd learn new things. I think it just like forces the player to try different things. And like you said about the progression system in this game is also one of those things I have a little bit of a problem with. So as you defeat more shrines, you basically will end up being able to pick up better weapons, and also the enemies in the game get more difficult. So the same enemies will be there, but they'll turn different colors, like you said. Like, then there'll be a white bokoblin or something. And so Link, like you said, doesn't level up, but instead gets more hearts, gets more stamina, finds better weapons. That's how you become a stronger hero and are able to defeat more enemies. But I don't feel like it's very balanced. Like, I feel like, and maybe we're going into like other territory, but it is related to combat. I think it gets way too easy as you go through the game.
Yes, that's true.
Like, as you become a better player, like understand the mechanics and understand the combat system. Like that feeling I had when I defeated my first Lionel. Like the terror that Lionel's inflicted upon me when I was first playing this game. That is the best feeling. Like when you are going
terror.
up against, when you're going up against this terrible, terrible monster and you are just absolutely terrified and you have a super long battle, like those are my favorite parts of this game. And like, halfway, 2/3 of the way through the game, I just wasn't having that experience anymore. I was like, now I can pick up the game and just like kill everything. Like I'm even starting over with 3 hearts and it's not that hard. I'm not on the difficulty setting, but anyway, so I I did, and again, maybe that's just because I played it too much. But even in my first playthrough, I was like, that's another reason why I wish there were some areas that were sanctioned off so that there could be even bigger challenges awaiting you once you got through a certain threshold.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And they kind of reserve that with the Hyrule Castle is supposedly the area that you shouldn't go. You can, but you shouldn't go there until you're, more able to handle things. But even then, it's just it's a lot of guardians, it's the flying guardians and the stationary ones, and they all do the same thing. They all shoot lasers, and you kind of learn how to defeat them. And if you bring enough ancient arrows with you, you're fine. So
right.
I totally get that. Like, it would be interesting if there were specifically reserved villains for a certain area that you get to. I think Lionels are definitely the hardest thing to fight throughout the game. They're harder than the Guardians, I think.
I would agree.
And there's a lot more at stake, and there's all these things that happen. But even then, you once you get into the groove of it, you learn how to defeat them too, and it just takes the time to go through the dodging them and hitting them with the counterattack, or shooting them in the face, or whatever the things are that you find that are their weaknesses. And it once you learn them, then it doesn't change. But so I totally get what you're saying.
And speaking of the enemies, I feel like, there just isn't a lot of variety either. Even within the divine beasts, you're just doing the same thing over again. You're defeating the same Calamity Ganon spirit. And it's slightly different. And there's Bokoblins and Lizalfos and
well, did you struggle with any particular divine beast at all?
Fighting the spirit or solving the puzzles?
Oh, either.
The divine beast, Phantom Ganon that I had the most trouble with was Thunderblight Ganon. And that, that was a challenge. I mean, they all were, and the first one was for sure for me. That was, the Waterblight Ganon was my first, because I did, Varuta. I think that's, Varuta first, the elephant first. But when I got to Thunderblight Ganon, I mean, that's a challenging enemy right there, for sure. He's throwing thunder lightning at you.
Well, yeah, and you got to figure out what he's doing, too. You, have to figure out the puzzle and how to defeat him, and that's what took me forever.
Yeah, definitely. There's always a little kind of puzzle to getting it all right. So let's really quick go back to your blacksmith pin that we put in the wall.
Oh, sure. Whoop, take that out.
Take that out, bring that back. Okay, here's my theory. Breath of the Wild was supposed to have a more intensive crafting segment of the game. There are so many materials and things that you collect. Obviously you can make elixirs, you can make, food and stuff, but there's ore and all this stuff. And the fact that your weapon breaks, I feel like it was one of those things that was definitely at least talked about and just never fully realized. And this game totally could have supported a way to maybe not repair. I don't know if it would be repairing your weapons or building your own or something. I mean, the closest we have is at one of the labs you can make armor and arrows and stuff for the Ancient Guardian stuff. Or in the Gerudo village, you can make tiaras out of sapphires and stuff. But you can
and then you can
them.
paint you can do the different dyes for your clothes at the other village. Yeah.
Hatino has that. Yeah, so there are small elements, but it's it definitely could have had a a better, crafting segment. And obviously it's fine game without it, but I just feel like this game was almost made for it and they just didn't put the final piece in, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like, I realized that all the different ores, like the topaz and the rubies and stuff, like they have different number values. So when you sell them, you can they're different values, and you can make those different tiaras out of them, and you use them to like upgrade certain things. When you do the fairy, the great fairies is the thing that's also pretty close to this sort of expanding thing where you use certain items like the animals or the ores or whatever to enhance your armor and make it stronger. But even then, I kept thinking that the ores were supposed to be used for crafting something because they have such specific descriptions. You know, they say this topaz is filled with the spirit of lightning or something like that. You know, like why else would it say that if you couldn't make a lightning sword out of it?
Right. Like, regardless of how much money I could have made, how many rupees I could have gotten from my ore deposits, like, I held through so much of the game onto all of my ore because I just kept thinking I'm gonna run into some place where I can craft something. Like, I just kept feeling like I should have, there was somewhere where, and then, you know, the Gerudo Town, like, tiaras and earrings and stuff, it was just a little disappointing because I wished there was more. Like, I ran around that what are the people called that are the boulder people?
The Gorons.
Thank you. I ran around that Goron town so many times thinking this would be the place where there would be a crafting something. But there wasn't.
So right.
So, those are my thoughts. Maybe for the next one we'll get something like that. I don't know. Maybe.
That would be really great. I would certainly prefer that because, like, I got really into wearing the right, like, having the right gear for every situation.
Right.
And if I didn't have the right sword or the right spear for that didn't have the lightning or the freezing thing or whatever, like, sometimes I would just stop what I was doing and go get one so I could bring it back. And then I'd make sure to put on the right outfit, you know.
Right.
Even if it didn't matter, or if it was weaker than my other one, I'd be like, well, even though I could be wearing the armor of cold right now, it doesn't look good for this area, so I'm going to wear the water one.
Right. And like, you can upgrade your armor sets when you visit the Great Fairies, and so there is like some part of it, but
I do a lot of that.
Yeah, but there just could be so much more.
Well, let's talk a little bit about then some of the elements that are a little bit unique and a little bit like subtler, maybe, like small details. Like, for example, this is something that I found as a little bit of a secret that was so fun to me that I didn't know if everyone knew. And it's the fact that any of the larger animals out there, like horses, of course, you can ride a horse. But if you actually run up to a deer or a bear, you can ride them and then, like, traipse around the forest riding a bear.
Yes.
And
yes.
To me, it's those sort of details, those little things that, like, don't really matter, and you can't keep the bear. There's no way. But, you know, you get to, like, enjoy that. I guess those sort of things are what make up for the fact that it didn't have as many of those crafting gamey elements.
Right.
Because they're so subtle and they're so small, you know, like, I think that is really cool. And if they do, when they expand this into Breath of the Wild 2 or whatever they end up calling it, I hope that they don't lose some of those subtle details in favor of, like, more traditional gaming things like crafting or like some of these expanded upgrades or the, you know, I hope they just don't sacrifice that.
Right. what makes this game so spectacular is that exploration element and discovery. Like, you are discovering these little things. You're discovering that you can ride a bear. You're discovering the story. You are discovering the Korok seeds. You're discovering the shrines. You know, you're unearthing all of these mysteries and secrets that they have laid out in this giant sandbox. And that ultimately is like the meat and heart of the game. And again, I have had enough time now to like nitpick over the game, but like that truly is why I love it and why I enjoyed playing it, and like just why I'm so excited for the continuation of the series.
Yeah, that's true. And I think something else that I don't think we quite touched on yet that makes this unique is not only is that exploration important, but every area that you go has a specific environment. And
yes,
that environment like deeply affects your experience. You know, if it's raining because you're in the rainforest jungle area, you know, all the NPC characters that you run into, they're like running quickly and you can't talk to them because they're trying to find shelter. You know?
yes.
And there's all these different little elements like that, like the fact that you get cold and you get hot and you have to wear the right clothing.
Yes.
And the fact that if you're on sand, you can't rock very fast because it's so deep and you have to have specific shoes for it. Like, that's amazing.
Absolutely. And this is just, again, so many things in this game are like fully realized ideas that the Zelda team has had for years. Like, that idea of having different temperatures in different areas, like, was originally way back in Ocarina of Time. Like, when the Death Mountain crater and the Fire Temple, like, you had to have like the red tunic so you're not doing damage to yourself in that game. Like, that was like the very seed of that idea that then has blossomed into this crazy system in Breath of the Wild, where you need either clothing items or elixirs to stave off the cold, or to protect yourself from lightning, or any other number of things.
Yeah, it makes it so much more immersive because, you know, in Ocarina of Time, when you get the red tunic or the blue tunic for the water or whatever, there's an element of that you're like, it's a little bit otherworldly. And so sometimes it's like, oh, well, it's red, so it protects him from hot things.
Right.
You know? But like in this one, when you go to the Death Mountain, you have to wear like fireproof gear that looks like something in real life a firefighter would have to wear. You know, it's like,
yes,
this big clunky thing, and it's so, I just love that they expanded that so much and made it so much more immersive, I guess, and just keep saying that.
Yeah, everything feels so realistic. Like, with the elements and with like the rain and the changing of the, you know, just the time itself, like with the sun and moon coming up, and with the completely different environments that you're in. Yeah, I would agree. Everything just, it makes sense. It's like, oh, I need warm clothes that, you know, that to get to the top of the mountain. Like, you know, you just, it makes sense, people.
It does. It does. So good.
But that whole, I mean, this whole physics engine and everything that I created to make it feel real and is so phenomenal from a technical standpoint, but also, yeah, what makes this game so crazy fun to just discover, and why everyone has different stories, because you can look at a problem, you can look at a situation, and you can connect the dots because you're using your real life knowledge, like, oh, I guess metal is going to conduct electricity. Like, I guess I should, like, unequip my sword so I don't get struck.
Right.
Or whatnot. yeah, it's just stuff like that that allows the player to make their own decisions.
So, can you tell me some of your favorite stories of things that you did in the game that were really fun for you? Like, did you have any moments that you just really enjoyed that you want to tell me about?
Well, one of my favorite things about Zelda games are the puzzles. And this, like I've already stated, the entire like survival aspect of the game is a puzzle within itself. And every encounter you run into is a puzzle. But I absolutely loved the creativity in the shrines and how because they were so connected to this far off distant past where anything could have happened with their Sheikah technology. I mean, the game developers could just do whatever the crap they wanted with how do we challenge the hero, and it just created some really, really fun challenges, and I love that. But my favorites were always the like shrine quests. Like if I hear that accordion playing and Cass is somewhere around, I'm a happy camper.
Oh yeah.
Like give me a good riddle. And so I really loved like the one that you had to ride a deer. Like you were saying, you can ride animals.
Yes.
And I got the riddle, but it took me forever to sneak up on a deer. Oh, man.
That was a tough one.
It was so hard.
I remember when I figured it out, like I was kind of like, I feel like I need to bring a deer over there. And I think I snuck up, and it was the first deer that I found. I got it like immediately.
You turd. I spent hours.
Yeah, I felt really lucky. I was like, that shouldn't have been so easy. I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be harder.
I went back to the village and bought all the stealth armor. I made a whole bunch of like stealth food. I was like sneaking up on deer left and right. And then what happens is once they see you, they all run away and you have to wait for them to come back.
Yeah. I feel for you. Even though it didn't happen to me, I feel that would have been annoying. I really liked the ones with the 3D puzzles where you had to use the Switch controller to like tilt things to get them to line up.
You liked those?
Yes, I liked them a lot. I thought that was cool.
I hated those so much. Oh,
well, they reminded me of those old games, where you had to like, there was a little marble and it was on a metal track and you had to get it to like the other end and you had to make it tilt and move all around. I used to do that all the time when I was a kid with my
Oh yeah,
my uncle
I do.
Had one. So
I remember those. That is so funny. Wow, I feel like I have such a like deep emotional I'm so opposed to the idea of it. Like even right now I'm just having this reaction of like, oh.
Well, you didn't have to like them. They were there for people like me who liked them.
Yes, and I'm glad that you like them. And Nintendo will just continue to attempt to make motion controls do things. And honestly, this is one of the better versions of that. So,
when I was on the first time I bought the game and I saved it. Because I wasn't going to play it until I went on a really long airplane ride. Because my wife and I were going to South Africa. And so we were like, I'll buy the game, but I won't play it until then. Because there's going to be so much time. And I really want to be like excited about it. And so I think I played the game for like, it's a 20-hour flight. So I think I played it for like 12 to 15 of those hours. Mm-hmm. And I remember while I was on the plane, I was like tilting things around and I'm sitting in my tiny seat, like tilting things. And like, I looked over at one point and there's this guy just watching me like with that curious face of, what are you doing?
That is so great. Oh man, I love it. One of my other favorite experiences, I honestly could go on forever, but running into the Korok forest
Oh, yeah.
into the
That was
mist
fun. Mm-hmm.
with nothing but a torch and no idea what's happening
Yes. No
was
idea.
wonderful. Those are my favorite experiences, like running into a labyrinth for the first time or ending up on Eventide Island. Like,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
yes, yes. So I like those kind of things were just so crazy and so fun to run into. And the Korok Forest was honestly one of my favorites because that whole process of getting through was again so challenging for me. Like, I know some people who picked up on that puzzle right away and followed the ashes. I didn't. It took me a really long time and it was so much fun.
I did really like those mazes, that you have to find. There's like three of them, I think.
Yeah,
And
those
there's
labyrinths.
yeah, the labyrinth. Those were really cool. And there's a temple or a shrine in each one, and there's like some chests. I liked those a lot. But I think even more than that, I had an experience trying to go to the Temple of Guardians. It was like the Temple of Time or something like that. It's where the really big statue is that you have to
Oh,
fight your way through a bunch
yeah.
of guardians.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that one, and it was very rewarding for me when I found that, and I figured
Yes.
out how to get through it. Because I tried a lot of times and I just couldn't do it. So I remember being like, well, I'm just gonna have to come back when I have better armor and better weapons and stuff. And so when I finally did, I felt so cool, and I knew I was like, this is an important moment, and I'm gonna come back to this shrine. And then when you finish all the shrines, you get the Master Sword from the spoiler alert. If you haven't played it and you don't want to know these things, I guess we should have said it at the beginning. But you you get the Master Sword in the Korok Forest, and then if you finish all the shrines, then you go to this Temple of Guardians, and then you can get the garb of the wild, which are Link's like iconic clothes, his green hat and tunic and pants or kilt thingy. And when I went there and I got those, I was just like completely elated, and it was one of the highlights of the game for me because I'd worked so hard not only to
Yeah.
get to that temple but also to get all of the shrines. So I was like, it was such a good moment for me, and I wore the heck out of those clothes. And
Yes.
I made sure to upgrade them as much as I could until I got impatient and I didn't want to find star fragments. And then I was like, I'm gonna defeat Ganon while wearing these clothes, and I'm gonna have the Master Sword, and I'm gonna find the Hylian shield, and I'm gonna do my best to get there. And I made sure that I didn't fight Ganon until I had all of those things,
Oh,
because
wow.
it needed to be that experience for me. And so I didn't try and fight Ganon at all until I had all of those things, because I just needed
Wow.
that.
That's crazy. I completed all the shrines and did everything, but I didn't finish all the shrines till after I had already defeated Ganon. I don't remember how far I was with the shrines, but I had defeated all the divine beasts. I felt pretty confident, and it took some effort, but like, yeah, and that shrine in particular in that big, trench, that is one of the last new discoveries I made in the game. And I mean, not to say there are probably still things I haven't discovered, to be honest. It's a big game. But that was one, I don't know if it was the last shrine I found. It was definitely one of the last. I was combing through Hyrule looking for those last few shrines, and it was one of the last ones I found, and because I had never run into it. I don't know why I never went down there. I just didn't. And Yeah, it's one of those examples of just how beautiful the set design is, where you're just so in awe of the ruins of this land, and like, and so there's so many mysteries, and like you just have this deep like curiosity of like, and your imagination runs wild with what it used to look like, you know? And honestly, that place in particular, I'm trying to remember it. People have said that it mirrors one of the games. Was it Skyward Sword? I feel like it is. And because there's like a tree on the left that's like growing out of, or is it, what is it? Oh crap. I don't even know if I can look that up, if I can like remember where that's from. But I had read somewhere that, because all these places in this game, like, they take from other Zelda games, and they just like, you know, it's so much fun discovering things. But that one specifically had someone theorized on an interesting story about it, and I was just like, oh yeah.
I think it might be Skyward Sword. It's not. I don't think they. I remember hearing a little bit about that too. That it's something from Skyward Sword. I wouldn't know because, like I said, I didn't play it.
Yeah.
But there's something about that. So it must be that the statue of the goddess is similar.
Right. That's it. Yes. Okay. Because Skyward Sword talks about like the beginnings of all of this Triforce madness, and there is this giant statue of Hylia, and so they say that that's the same statue, and there are like ruins. It's almost as if someone had built a giant temple around the temple of Skyward Sword, and so like you can see the outlines of where that original Skyward Sword temple is, and then there's the giant statue of Hylia, all within this super big, huge, giant temple. And it's just like stuff like that just is like, wow, the game designers just really went all out with connecting things, and it's just so fun.
Yeah. I agree. It's just such a cool thing to have those connections to the past, and who knows what they'll do in the future, and have connections to this one. I think the last thing that I have on my notes that I really want to talk about is hopes for the future and in the sequel, and potential things that might be able to happen. We've kind of talked about those throughout, with the blacksmith and the repairing things and all that jazz. But my biggest thing I've saved for the end, that the thing that I want the most to happen in the next game, or maybe the next one after that, I don't care, but I feel like it could happen in this next one, is the ability to play as Link or Zelda simultaneously. I think that would just be the coolest thing, that like you get to bounce between their stories, or like switch characters, or maybe like Zelda has to save Link this time, or like the way that the game ends suggests that Zelda and Link are gonna go off on their own adventure together, and so you're like, what, maybe I can be Zelda. Like that. Yes. To me would just be the best thing ever. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for.
Honestly, if they don't, again, I agree. I agree. If they don't do any of the other things that I wish for, but make Zelda a playable character, I would be so happy. I would die. If there was like, I mean, I don't know if they would go so far as to make it like a co-op option, but I think I would cry.
Oh, I think I would too. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like,
I didn't even consider that.
So cool.
Yes.
And honestly, the other things that I have that I'm hoping for, like, I don't even want to talk about them anymore, because I'm just like, I'm just imagining being able to play as Zelda, and like, maybe she has, like, you can use her, like, magic powers or whatever, or maybe she's more adept at certain weapons or something, or I don't even know, but it would be so cool. And like, I just want an adventure with them together, you know? Like,
That would be really...
so often, you know, it's just Link running around and Zelda stuck in a tower somewhere. And that's what I really loved about the beginning of Wind Waker, is that, like, you have these very vibrant characters, and they are interacting, and they're, like, going on a journey together.
Yeah. And they're so cute.
And
that's just so... I loved that, too.
Yeah. So yeah, I would agree. That would be really phenomenal if we could get Zelda to be more a part of the story, for sure. Yeah.
Especially now because she has the richest backstory in this game, you know, more than Link does. It's tough to give a character backstory who has, like, sworn to not speak. So
yeah.
it's hard to
true.
really expand on that.
Yeah.
But I think that they could, and, you know, I also really like that, you know, they didn't lean into some sort of romance between the two of them. You know, they have their hints that they have this sort of relationship, but they also, you know, give it doubts because Zelda's such a strong woman and she doesn't need Link to protect her. You know, it's, I appreciate that. And so it'd be interesting to take it to the next level of, like, it's not only is it not just a romantic sort of thing. It might be, but it doesn't have to be. It could be just their adventuring partners, you know, like that'd be really cool.
For sure. I would be happy and content with that, for sure. Also, like I said at the beginning, though, I'm a sappy romantic, so I wouldn't mind if there was a little more.
Sure. I wouldn't mind that either. I think that their relationship is really sweet, and so if they were to fall in love, I would have no problem with that either, if they were to more expand on that, because they have, you know, made lots and lots of allusions to that in previous games and in this one. So I'm not opposed to that either. I think that's cool too.
The only thing we know for sure is that, well, I guess we don't know for sure, but, like, I would assume from the trailer that we are getting the same Link and the same Zelda and the same Hyrule as Breath of the Wild. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with that. And another thing that I am kind of looking forward to is I would really love them to, you know, they say they're going to go off and rebuild Hyrule. Well, I want to actually see that. Like, this has been a really phenomenal piece of work and piece of storytelling in this quiet, apocalyptic, torn apart world. But I want to see more places like Hateno Village, where we actually have Hylians running around that you can interact with, and vibrant communities. And, you know, like having Castletown back in some way, you know, like that's something that this game is missing, is like a vibrant, bustling city. And so I think that would be super cool.
Was it Majora's Mask that had that?
Yeah.
Had like a little city.
Yeah, it was Majora's Mask, and I miss that.
Yeah, I do too. That was really cool. I'd love to see that again too. And yeah, the way that the game ends does suggest, you know, they're going to rebuild everything, and you might be able to be a part of that, and that would be interesting, because if you have to rebuild it, then maybe Ganon, you know, his plot is against you in a different way. You know, it's not as much of a, like, he's already destroying everything. It's like, you know, maybe he's subverting you in a more invisible way. You know, they haven't really played with that, and that could be interesting too. Who knows? Yeah.
Another thing that I truly think could happen based on the trailer is, to preface this, I really loved finding the shrines that you're like, your little meter is beeping like crazy and you can't find it because it's underneath you. You're like where you had to jump off a cliff and, like, bomb arrow the heck out of a wall to, like, find the shrine hidden in a tunnel. I just, like, in the very, very, very original 2D games, and I've never played the 2D games, But like
You'll have to get to it sometime. They're great.
Yeah, you're bombing the heck out of walls and stuff, and finding tunnels and things. And I think that would be really, really cool if there was more of that, and they have this whole map. So what if there was like a whole map just like that, except as tunnels and like caves hidden below the surface? Like there's definitely a lot of hidden items like in Breath of the Wild already that are kind of like that, but even in the trailer we see that they're underground somewhere. So what does it mean? And it looks like a much darker game, which also like feels a little Majora's Mask-esque, which I'm very excited for.
That's true, yes. I like the variety that the games have had. I've always preferred the lighter games. Wind Waker was really great, but I also loved Twilight Princess, which was quite dark. Yeah. It could go. I'd be just fine. Again, I guess I don't really have that many complaints. Do what they want, and I would still love it.
It's true. I mean, even with all the things that I've just mulled over this game too much, but like, again, this has been like my favorite Zelda experience so far. And honestly, even with all of its imperfections, what gets me so excited is that there are imperfections, that this is just the beginning. Like, this is just the platform from which Nintendo will jump off and, fly off to wherever we're going next. And I'm very excited.
Yeah, that'd be a good analogy there. I see what you did with the glider reference.
Uh-huh. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Speaking of gliders, you know what was one thing that I really wanted? I wanted an upgraded glider, too. I forgot about that. That would have been cool. I played Mario Kart, and in Mario Kart, you can unlock the glider from Breath of the Wild as one of the little tools. Yes. But they also have another glider that's like another version, and I was like, is this a secret reference to like another glider I can get in Breath of the Wild that I'm not aware of?
Right.
It's not. You can't
it's
find
not.
it. I don't know.
Nope.
I mean, maybe it is, but I don't think so. I Googled
not.
it and it's not.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yes, please. Maybe they'll give Zelda a glider.
Hey, that's right. She deserves one.
She does. She's been cooped
Especially
up
for being
for 100 years.
Yeah.
She
cooped up for 100 years and not being a playable character for at least 20.
Yeah. What's up with that? Well, we've gone through a lot with Breath of the Wild here, and we have yet to scratch the surface, honestly. So if that doesn't convince you to play the game, I don't know what will.
Seriously, you should go and play the game now and just enjoy the graphics. If nothing else, just Google it and see what it looks like. If you can't afford it, you can watch some YouTube videos and watch people play it, because it's really fun to do that too, and you can kind of get some of the experience out of it. And it's definitely worth investing in to play the game and get the experience, because it's really a special treat that, like I said before, has kind of affected me as a person. It's really empowered me to be a more confident person. So this really is a great game.
Absolutely. It's such a fun experience. You just get lost in the world of Hyrule. Really briefly, because we do it every episode. We've talked a really long time already, but what have you been watching or playing recently?
I have been watching Carmen Sandiego on Netflix.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous. Like, my wife and I are watching it together, and she loves it. She thinks it's so much fun, and we've been watching it together. We got my nephew into it, and it just brings me back. I played the game when I was growing up. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? That's like a geography game, basically. But it's so cool because the graphics are stunning, and you learn something, and it's funny. Yeah, I've really enjoyed Carmen Sandiego.
Good. Yes, I absolutely love that show. It's so visually beautiful. I love just staring at it.
What about you, Kelly? What have you been watching?
Well, I've been watching Demon Slayer.
Oh, right. That's right.
Right. And we had talked about this before we started recording. So I'm not even going to like go into it. But just if you haven't watched Demon Slayer, just watch it. Like, I mean, if you trust me at all from listening to this podcast, just trust me. Go watch it right now. That's it. That's all you need to know. It's becoming one of my favorite anime of all time. So, what are you doing still being here? Go watch it.
Kelly, you should come up with like a catchphrase or something for telling people to watch things, because yeah, she does have really good recommendations.
Oh, thank you. But besides that, I got Fire Emblem Three Houses for Christmas, and I mean, there hasn't been a game since playing Breath of the Wild that I've spent this many hours on. And so I'm really enjoying
Fire Emblem games. That's good. Fire Emblem games are really good. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, this is my first Fire Emblem game, so it's a whole new world.
Oh, good. You'll have lots to explore then.
Yes. I refuse to let any of my characters die. I mean,
good luck with that.
I've been like 2 hours into a battle, and I will restart because someone died.
Too emotionally connected.
I am. I care too much about these characters.
That's fair. I remember doing that with some of those games too. So it's hard to let go of them, and you don't want them to die. You're playing a game. Death is not a part of the game.
Yes. So I'll let you know how that goes. Who survives by the end. All right. Thanks again so much for joining me, Josh. This has been super awesome. And
of course.
Zelda is so phenomenal. I love all of the games, and this is by far the most memorable for me, and I cannot wait until we get more.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelly.
You're very welcome, Josh. Thank you for being here, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. There was so much about Breath of the Wild we did not get to discuss. So be sure to let us know what you thought about the game on Facebook and Instagram at Fanimated Podcast. You can also email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. I'd also love to know what your favorite Nintendo Switch games are. I'm looking to expand my gaming horizons, and I always love hearing recommendations. The art for this podcast is done by myself. You can find me on Instagram at CandorDraw. That's KANDERDRAW. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and as always, a huge thank you to Josh for joining me today. Talk with you all soon, and in the meantime, stay tuned and stay animated. Okay. I realized I didn't talk about animation at all.
Oh, shoot.
That's kind of the name of the game.
This is an animation podcast, and we didn't even mention animation.
Oops.
Well, it's beautiful.
So we've already talked about the physics engine a little bit, and that's kind of like the bread and butter of this game, technical prowess wise, and the fact that you don't have to have any load screens to get from one side of Hyrule to the other. But other than that, it's really not a very technically complex game. Like, Link's, movement animations are very simplistic. Like, there are other games where you can jump and climb and do this stuff in, like, all sorts of crazy, like, movements. But Link climbs left, and then he climbs right, and then he can go up or down. Like, there are not very many different... for every movement Link can do, there's an animation for it, but there's not a lot of variety within that, if that makes sense. And it's not something you necessarily... Yeah, it's not like Assassin's Creed where there's like a ton of different animations for, running on a rooftop. Yeah. So, but despite that, like, you didn't even notice because it's not that kind of game. Like, it's not a, if anything, like, it's more about just like the expansive settings, and like that is what's really, really beautiful. Like, even the fact that there's, despite like some creatures will like pop in, but in general, like everything's just like already there. Like you can see everything. Like whatever you see off in the distance, you can get to, you know? And what I really, really love is that, you know, again, despite it's not some super detailed, like there are some super detailed graphic games out there, but the style of Breath of the Wild just looks like a watercolor painting. And I love that. What I love especially is like with this physics engine, with what they can do, the atmosphere, your surroundings are always changing too. And the lighting, again, I'm a lighting snob. I love the lighting in this game. From like the moonlight to like, if I happen to be in the middle of something when the sun is coming up, I just drop everything and I just stare at this virtual sunrise. It's gorgeous. It's so good. And whether you're in a storm or you're in, the desert, like Link is always like, the lighting surrounding Link and surrounding the environments is always changing, and it's just really well done and really beautiful. It's like I have so many other things, but I'm just like, I don't know. We can't talk about it all.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Like, we could keep going, but this is already going to be a long episode, so, you might want to save some things for the listeners to enjoy for themselves, I think.
I would agree.